Hello everyone. We're just waiting on a few more last minute sign-ups. All right, hello everyone and thanks for joining us. Today the Energy Saving Trust Transport team will be continuing our webinar series with Leading the Charge, a webinar focused on charging electric vehicles and the available infrastructure in Scotland. Specifically, we will be looking at government policies and targets, EST support, technology, charging hubs, home charging, workplace and destination charging, as well as public charging. Then we'll move on to our Q&A. My name is Gordon McGregor and I work in the transport team dealing with our many loan offerings. More on that later, maybe. Just a quick couple of points before we begin. We can't hear you, but you can hear us. The webinar will last around 60 minutes, including questions. You can ask questions at any time during the webinar, and if you do happen to have a question, please type them in the text box in the sidebar of your screen, and we'll respond during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Due to the volume of questions that we might get, it might not be possible to respond to all of these, so apologies for this. If you really would like to get a response to your query, our contact details will be provided at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to get in touch with us via these. We will be recording the webinar and it will be available online in the near future, and we'll also circulate the slides afterwards. So as well as myself being here, we're also joined by Ian McLeod, who's also of EST, and Bob Murphy of Swarco. So I'll introduce our first speaker, Ian McLeod. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, thanks very much for the Gordon. So just before I start, just a quick poll to check just sort of already what the existing awareness amongst the audience is. So if you could all just answer yes or no to the question on your screen. Have you heard of ChargePlace Scotland before? And we'll just give that a moment and wait for the results to come back in. All right. Okay, good. So it looks like some good awareness already. People already some understanding of ChargePlace Scotland, but hopefully the information you'll hear today will flesh that out a little bit more. So moving on from that, and 2 secs. So just to start with, just a little bit of just to make sure you understand where we are to begin with electric vehicles, or ULEVs, ultra low emission vehicles, which is the terminology we use now. So these are defined as vehicles, as you can see there, which emit less than 75 grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer from their tailpipe, or are able to drive at zero emissions, again, from their tailpipe for a range of at least 20 miles. So that's ones that probably have some kind of battery that enables them to get that kind of distance without the need of petrol or diesel support. They're split into 3 types. So first of all, you have battery or pure electric vehicles. So these have no tailpipe emissions, and some of the advantages of them is the low running costs that they enjoy is due to the electricity rather than fuel being pretty cheap, and the servicing and maintenance and repair costs are also cheaper than with conventional fuel vehicles due to fewer moving parts. The overall emissions that these produce will fall as the amount of as the grid gets greener, as there more and more renewables come online to displace higher fossil fuel ones. So the benefits of these from an environmental perspective will increase over time, which applies to all of these vehicles when they are running in electric mode. After battery electric, you have extended range electric vehicle. So these are vehicles which have a battery and it combines with a internal combustion engine. However, the internal combustion engine only drives the electric drive motor. There's no separate IC engine which is being driven by that. So it's similar to a pure electric vehicle, but it has that added range thanks to that small petrol or diesel tank that it has. Finally, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which again have a battery, generally quite a bit smaller than a pure electric battery, and then they have a petrol or diesel tank on top of that. So the vehicles are pretty smart at this point, where they can work out itself which particular mode it's most efficient to be in. But it does mean you can go a certain distance without having to rely on petrol or diesel, which means if you have, say, a commute that's within a certain distance, then you can do most of your journeys relying purely on battery, which obviously brings down your emissions quite considerably, and the cost of running it without having to rely on that petrol or diesel, which is there as a backup. Okay. And so why are we looking at electricity? Well, vehicles powered by electricity release fewer greenhouse gas emissions than petrol or diesel, and that is, as I said earlier, that is going down all the time as this UK's grid gets more renewables online, and some of the worst polluters, coal in particular, numbers are dropping. That means that the vehicles, due to the high efficiency of them relative to petrol and diesel, the energy required to go a particular distance from the starting source to the end, what we call the well to wheel ratio, is lower, and it means, as I say, going forward, it gets the emissions that they result from that, your vehicle journey is much lower. You actually have quite a good website which recommend there, have a link to the carbon intensity, which shows a snapshot of the grid and particular areas of the UK at any given time. So you can see at the time this was taken on the 28th of November, it was obviously quite a windy day, not uncommon here, and 75%, so 3/4 of the electricity that was coming to our grid at that time was just from the wind. So if you were charging your vehicle at that time, then you would know that very little of the energy it was running off was producing CO2 emissions. Another advantage of the electricity, running your vehicles off electricity, is the ready availability of that network. So you can pretty much anywhere there's electricity, you could effectively install a charge point of some kind and you'll be able to plug your vehicle in there. For higher powered charge points, which we'll talk about a little bit about later on, you can require some additional costs and works to accommodate them, but generally speaking, it's much easier than something which would require building up a whole new infrastructure to deliver that energy. Finally, they're very efficient. So a petrol vehicle will use about 30%, convert about 30% of the potential energy in the petrol to begin with, will actually convert into motion of the vehicle. A lot of the rest is lost in just generally heat, noise, and so forth. Whereas with an electric vehicle, from the energy source to how much is converted into motion, it's more around sort of 80-85%, so considerably more efficient. And hydrogen, which is another low emission form of transport, certainly, but it doesn't quite have the same level of efficiency as electric vehicles. So because of the added requirement to electrolyze the water and to pressurize it compared to just taking it straight out of the plug, means that hydrogen is about 3 times less efficient than an electric vehicle. So it will take 3 times as much energy to go the same distance in a hydrogen vehicle as an electric vehicle. So it's, for now, a lot of our focus is on electric. And so separate to that, why are we looking to do this? Obviously, issues around climate change, which again, we're speaking about emissions. The IPCC recently had a report come out which showed that we have 12 years to make drastic shifts to our economy in order to ensure that we keep our our emissions low enough to avoid a 1.5 degree rise in global temperatures, which scientists have identified as a sort of danger point which we don't want to go beyond. Unfortunately, seeing from that news article there, we're seeing emissions rise again for the first time in several years. And as a result of this, we're going to likely see much hotter temperatures here, and just generally we're on track for a much larger number of degrees increase in global temperatures, and the disasters that could lead to. So that's at a global level, but at a more local level, the air pollution from the tailpipe emissions from non-electric vehicles causes all kinds of problems as well to people in a sort of more immediately aware of, health threats to people. There's some studies have shown sort of tens of thousands of life years lost per year as a result of harm done to people as a result of the emissions of this, is sort of impairing development of children and so forth. So there's a lot of reasons for why we want to be really shifting that technology more away from petrol and into electric and low emission vehicles. So the Scottish Government, obviously very aware of these issues, has been very proactive on this. In its programme for government in 2017, it announced plans to phase out the need for new petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2032, had a raft of policies that it put in place alongside that to encourage that uptake. So looking at, as you see there, 1,500 new charge points in homes, businesses and communities. A lot of the other stuff here is from the more recent programme for government that announced this year, so a few months ago. So looking at getting 20 electric towns and cities across Scotland by 2025. So these would be towns and cities that are fully enabled with the infrastructure in place to ensure that people there can easily switch over to electric. Enabling the taxi sector to switch over to electric by getting in taxi ranks in places that will help them, and major transport tourist hubs. Again, just building up the charging infrastructure, which we'll talk about more soon, and helping consumers and businesses make the switch through some of the different means of support that we will discuss, and also providing access to electric vehicles for those who perhaps aren't at the stage of being able to afford them through housing associations and car clubs stationed there, because the future is electric, as we are aware. Okay, so just briefly in some of the funding and support we have. So we have grants support that we can provide towards the installation of home charge points and workplace charge points. I'll go into more detail on that shortly. And we also have a low carbon transport loan where we can provide up to 35,000 interest-free loan for ULEV, and up to separate to that, we also provide funding for e-bikes and e-cargo bikes. So these are bikes that are pedal assist electric. So you pedal and there's a battery which does a lot of the work, so it reduces the amount of energy and the exertion required. And if you've never had a go in one, highly recommend taking advice of our offers to have a loan in these, and perhaps afterwards find that you're interested in taking advantage of those loans. And we offer free and impartial advice for consumers and businesses, and also programs Switched On at Work, which enables organizations to take on. We would engage with you and provide you with information for you or your employees to make the changes to switch over to electric vehicles. And finally, Feel Good driver training, which teaches you tricks or teaches on how you can reduce your consumption in a conventional vehicle, but also tricks on how to, for an electric vehicle, make the range go as far as possible, and a lot of just increasing understanding of how these vehicles work. And so now over to Bob Murphy of Swarco to talk a little bit more on some of the technologies.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the webinar. I do apologise if anybody was expecting the dulcet tones of Stephen Rennie. I'm afraid he couldn't make it today, and I am his stunt double. I also want to apologise in advance for any jokes that you might have heard before. But let's crack on. I'll give you a bit of introduction to myself first of all. My name's Bob Murphy, and I'm one of the business development managers for Swarco Evolt. We've worked very closely with the Energy Saving Trust over the last 7 or 8 years, to develop the ChargePlace Scotland network, which will cover and work to improve range confidence for people driving electric vehicles all through the country. My background is as an electric vehicle fleet manager and a charge point host, and I've been involved since 2011 with industry. So yeah, I've seen a few changes in that sort of period of time. Swarco itself, for those of you who don't recognise the name, was an independent company formed in Austria by Manfred Swarovski. So you might recognise that name if you're out buying Christmas presents just now. He is related, or rather was related, to the Swarovski Crystal Group. So Swarco cover a lot of road traffic safety, road signalling, traffic management products, intelligent e-mobility solutions and services, and charge points are now a key component of their business. And yeah, it's a growing company and with a worldwide presence. And Evo is a brand of Swarco nowadays. So Evo itself, we have been involved, as I say, in the kind of charging infrastructure business since 2011. We now have 140 rapids installed in Scotland, 1,300 AC charging points. We work with 31 Scottish councils with a large private sector customer base. Our staff use electric vehicles, our engineers use electric vehicles. We're all enthusiastic about electric vehicles, and we were an accredited Go Ultra Low company, and very, very experienced in the kind of machinations, if you like, of supplying charge point infrastructure. Now, to think about electric cars, you think they've been around for a short time? No. What you're seeing on the screen just now is an electric car that's over 100 years old. So they've been around for quite a considerable period. This is a car that was manufactured local to Leith in Granton down the road. And it was a conversion of a horse-drawn coach that used to run back and forward on Leith Walk to take stuff back and forward to the post office. But it just goes to show that this technology isn't new. It's been around for a very, very long period of time. And even back in the day, those cars were plugged into charging points. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the one that was charged into, but it was probably quite a basic sort of thing. So the network itself, to cover sort of charging basics then, there's 3 core types of EV charging: rapid, fast and slow. Now those represent the different power output that's available from the charge point and therefore the different charging speed that's available to the EV drivers. Rapid chargers can take a car to around about 80% charge in 30 minutes using either AC or DC. Fast chargers, usually 3 or 4 hours for a full charge, so they're well suited to workplaces, destination charging. And slow charging is best for overnight. So a slow charger is the kind of charger you would have at your house, so you could plug your car in when you come back home from work and it's ready to go for you again the next morning. The connectors that you see on the right hand side of the screen are the different types of connector on a rapid charger. Those are all standardized now worldwide, and so on each rapid charger you'll find 3 different outlets to cater for the type of vehicle that you have. Every manufacturer has a slightly different approach to it, but things are becoming more standardized across the ranges nowadays as manufacturers are moving towards CCS charging, which is DC, and that's the bottom connector on the right hand side there. The types of chargers that are on the network just now are these types of AC destination charging. These are ground mounted posts with dual outlets on them. They're popping up quite a lot across the country nowadays. And those are basically the kind of mainstay of the charging network, available from 7 kilowatt to 22 kilowatt power, and you'll find those in parks and rides, workplaces, railway stations, and variations of that one as well. The one I'm showing there just now is the one that we manufacture, but there are of course other manufacturers out there doing the same sort of thing for the benefit of all EV drivers and EV users. They're designed to sort of stand up in very, very harsh environments. They're all IP rated, so ingress protection rated. They've got aluminium construction. They meet the various British standards and the various worldwide standards for charging points. They can be smart chargers where you use an RFID card to kind of switch on the post and begin a charge, or they could be dumb chargers as well. It depends on the kind of installation that's being done at the kind of time there. But they can also be upgraded over the airwaves as well. So, if the kind of protocols and software and things like that change, ChargePoint hosts and ChargePoint manufacturers can upgrade those posts to keep pace with the technology, to make sure that the communication between the post and the car is always maintained at a good kind of level. The rapid chargers are a bit bigger. The form factor of rapid chargers has come down a lot in the last few years. Back in the days, they were the size of a phone box or bigger and only ever had one socket on them. But now we offer ones that are quite slimline and have the 3 sockets on them. These can charge 2 vehicles at the same time, and the leads can be locked into the post to prevent vandalism. The power technology is modular, so it makes them easy to maintain, easy to repair, and also means that there's a bit more redundancy and reliability in the system there as well. They've all got multiple language support, and again, you've got simple to use touchscreen functionality on them, so that the whole process of plugging in a car is a very, very easy and very, very sort of painless process to do it. But again, these are out on the ChargePlace network. These are roughly every 30 miles on the trunk roads. They're designed to facilitate longer journeys. So if you want to drive a car with 150 miles range from here to Thurso, you can easily do that by hitting the charging stations along the road to charge the car. And it's always a nice way to break up a trip as well, because you're forcing yourself, if you like, to have to stop, to have to take a little bit of a rest, have a little bit of a break. And certainly for me, it gives me time to check my emails and so on and so forth as we go. Other technologies that are currently on the market are things like lamp post technologies. You can see that on the right hand side there. This is something that is going to be very, very popular in the inner cities, particularly in places like London and other places where the streetlights are close to the curb. In Scotland, our streetlights are traditionally set a little bit back, but there may be some applications for that up here. Other things to look at are distributed load management. So you'll have that row of chargers you see there. One of them is a master charger, the other chargers are slave chargers. So the master charger controls all the charging protocols, and it also means that they can be connected on a very limited power supply and still be able to provide enough charging for the cars without overloading buildings. This is also the same for what's called our baby rapid chargers, which are 22 kilowatt DC outlets. And those are particularly useful in areas where a rapid charger is good to be put in on the network, but there's maybe not enough power to provide a full power 50 kilowatt rapid charger. But this is, again, something else that's going towards bolstering the network and allowing drivers to push the cars a little bit extra and have that reassurance that they can get a charge wherever they go. The network itself, as the poll did at the start of the kind of webinar, ChargePlace Scotland, most of you are aware of it, but just in case people aren't quite sure about it, it's operated on behalf of the Scottish Government by a company called Charge Your Car Limited. And what it does is it provides full back office operations and management for EV drivers and post hosts. All the transactions, the billing, the tariffs and fault reporting are done through ChargePlace Scotland. So as a ChargePlace Scotland subscriber, if you have any issues or you're using a post that's a chargeable post, then everything goes through them as a kind of one-stop shop for everything to do with the public charging. It's usually a subscription-based service where you get an RFID card that you pay maybe £20 for a whole year, but that gives you access to all the ChargePlace Scotland posts around the country. On the little map you see down the bottom showing the River Forth in our kind of locality, all the posts are marked there. And if it's a blue post, it means it's available, and the website will also show you if a post is not available or if it's occupied with other vehicles. So you can helps plan your journey a little bit as you go. The majority of the ChargePlace Scotland network just now is still free of charge to use, so if you're driving to Thurso again, it might cost you nothing. Personally, I find it's costing me more in coffee than it ever did in petrol, but that's just because of the mileage that I drive. I think I've done 10,000 miles electric since end of July this year. So that's a kind of proof that the network is more than capable of supporting the kind of longer distance stuff. Day-to-day journeys, most people only drive maybe 20 or 30 miles per day, and if you're charging from home, which 90% of the charging will be, then you've still got the network there as a backup if you need it. But you're not going to struggle to put the volts into your car. To register for ChargePlace Scotland, it's pretty simple. You just create an account, you register your bank card or payment details, you purchase an access card, or you can go pay-as-you-go by using their app. So it's a fairly straightforward process. For post hosts, they will have access to the back office as well, so they can see how much energy is being used on their post, who's using it and when. They can also set tariffs and exemptions on the post as well. So that allows anybody who's providing the electricity for a post and providing location for a post to make those posts self-sustaining in the future. And with the tariffs and things set on them, that means that they can more or less pay for themselves as time goes on. Speaking from experience as a post host myself, we found when I worked at Edinburgh College that they really didn't cost that much to run. The energy use was negligible, and in some cases where you've got solar power or other renewable sources, you might find that the amount of power you're generating more than covers the amount of power that's used by the vehicles that are using your charge posts. So it's not as expensive as people might think it is. So the network itself has grown exponentially over the last few years. Back in 2011, when I started in this industry, we got 4 cars for Edinburgh College. There were maybe 9 electric vehicles registered in Edinburgh at the time. We had no plugs at all. Wherever there's the 3-pin socket though, and you've got the adapter for the car, you can plug the car in. But we had to get the students to manufacture charge points, and if we were looking at that map back then, there would be no dots on it. But this kind of gives a good indication of what's available on the kind of network just now. You can see the main routes are well covered, the central belt's well covered, sort of main population areas, and things like the North Coast 500 are well covered as well. This shows all the charge points that are available, not just ChargePlace Scotland. And you can see from the kind of stats to the right hand side there, looking at a UK-wide level, just how much increase there has been in charge points since the way back in the early days there. That's a trend that's only going to continue as more and more people go for electric vehicles. The Scottish Government's aim is to eliminate the need for new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2032. It doesn't mean that petrol and diesel vehicles will disappear overnight. It just means you won't be able to buy brand new ones. So the kind of network infrastructure's got to kind of ramp up to meet that upcoming demand as time goes on. And the nice thing about it is that with it being a distributed charge point network, it means that if you're in a rural area and you have access to a home charger or a charger at your local community centre, you don't have to drive 40 miles to get to a petrol station and pay through the nose for diesel that's been shipped there by truck, then by a ferry, or whatever other way it gets to the island. So it makes the whole transport system an awful lot greener as time goes on. So I mentioned ChargePlace Scotland and other networks. So we have other networks in Scotland: the Ecotricity, Polar, PodPoint, InstaVolt, Engenie, the Tesla network, ZeroNet, and things at vehicle dealerships. In most of these cases, you will need a separate subscription or a separate card to access these points. But if you have that, then you're able to use those as well. Again, those are located at places like filling stations and so on and so forth. There are some pay-as-you-go options coming up as well, but let's face it, if you've got a charge point that's free to use within 15 minutes of one that you have to pay for, we're Scottish, we're going to go to the one that's free. So, but again, it's just bolstering the networks, it's allowing people to further the uptake of EVs as time goes on, and it's no bad thing to have a wide choice of charging options as you're on the roads. So there's emerging technologies coming up. So as the charging network evolves, as things improve with the take-up of electric vehicles, there's a demand for a consumer-led demand for even quicker charging. So now people are looking at 150 kilowatt chargers or 350 kilowatt chargers, but it's important to remember that your car will only charge as fast as your car will charge. If you've got a car that only charges at maybe 22 kilowatts or 11 kilowatts, it will not take 150 kilowatt from 150 kilowatt charger. One of the recent things that came out through the RAC Foundation was a report that identified where plug-in hybrid vehicles that can only charge at a slow rate were using rapid chargers and blocking those rapid chargers for a wee length of time there. So there's a bit of a misconception that your car can take a high power charge if the high power charger is there, but it's relying on what the vehicle can actually can take through. You know, if you think of filling a battery like filling a cinema full of people. If you've got bigger doors, you can get more people in, but if you've only got one little single door, you can only get a small number of people in at the one time. So that's a kind of good way of looking at it. Other technologies are coming up as well, maybe a wee bit a wee bit further ahead in the future, things like vehicle to grid. So your electric vehicle then becomes a mobile storage system, so you can export energy back to the grid to help level out grid demand. There's also wireless charging as an option down in lines that's being looked at in Scandinavia and things, and there's talk of green highways where you don't need any cables at all. You just drive over a plate on the road and the car charges up like your toothbrush would. There's also moves afoot to make one card to rule them all, so rather than having different subscriptions for different networks, you'll have one card that can access every charger everywhere. There's also plans afoot for targeted charger deployment. The Electric A9s are Transport Scotland initiative to bolster the kind of trunk road network, and we're also looking at solar canopies and battery storage and things like that as well in the future, which leads me nicely on to our Dundee hub. So this is a UK first up in Dundee, which was recently named the most forward-thinking European city for electric vehicles. What you have there are 6 rapid chargers, 3 22 kilowatt chargers, solar canopies over the charge points to A, keep you dry, and B, generate energy, which then goes into the battery storage system that's also on site using upcycled second life EV batteries. This is very much a proof of concept in high density urban areas where people don't have off-street parking. This is a great way for people to get a charge into their car or for taxi drivers to get a charge to allow them to continue their kind of daily working things. We've got a third hub in Dundee that's going to be completed the next week or so. I think it'll be open to the public, and that'll be another solar canopy hub in addition to the non-solar canopy hub that's already active in the Lockheed area. So this is definitely a template for other cities to take up and deploy, and you'll probably see these quite a lot over the next few years on various brownfield sites and so on. Well, that concludes my presentation for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll pass you back to the team, and we'll look forward to your questions later on.
All right, thank you very much for that, Bob. That was all really interesting. And what we'll do now is just sort of tie in a lot of what Bob's spoken about to show how this can work for you as a consumer who owns an electric vehicle. So what might your traveling look like with an electric vehicle? So start where you probably start the day, at home. You can get a charge point installed at your home and charge your vehicle overnight. By having that there will greatly reduce the amount of times you'd have to go to service stations you would now with a conventional vehicle. This, of course, depends on you having off-street residential parking available to that. And there is funding available for that. So both from the Office for Low Emission Vehicles, or OLEV, who are based in England, they provide £500 to any UK resident with an electric vehicle for a domestic install. And for those who are fortunate enough to live in Scotland, they can apply for an additional £300 top-up grant from the EST. And if you're interested in that, you can either find information on our website or you can email us on the email address shown there. So some of the other sort of benefits. So more broadly, outside the support we have, this industry is really waking up and emerging, and there's a lot of shifts to try and accommodate this kind of taking on electric vehicles and incorporating them into people's daily use and how they manage their energy. So a number of tariffs are being set up for some energy providers, which will help to incentivize people to make that switch. So examples of these are having a reduced off-peak tariff for the evening, which means that when you plug your car in at night, the electricity is coming to you at a much lower rate. So it costs you less to charge at night than during the day. So real advantage there for what is already a cheaper way of running a vehicle. Some offer free EV miles, where you basically get a certain amount of basically just credited into your account, and the idea is that will be going towards electricity that powers your car and takes you a certain distance. You can opt to go for 100% renewable electricity providers. So the money you give to those companies is going only to renewable producers, which ensures that you can drive it with as clean a conscience as you can in terms of worrying about the emissions that you're producing. And you can also get discounts on using public charge points and in certain networks. And beyond that, if you wish to integrate it with other technologies, other renewable technologies such as solar PV and battery storage, you can have a battery in your house which the solar PV will charge up during the day when the sun is shining, and then you can opt to charge your vehicle off that battery at other times when the sun isn't shining, and again reducing the electricity that you're taking off the grid and the cost to yourself, as that is just electricity that's been produced from your own renewables on your roof. And vehicle to grid was something that Bob touched on earlier as well, which is something that would enable people to have your car communicate with the network of electricity generally, so you can actually provide electricity back into the grid to help load management, help things such as the intermittency of renewables. So if the grid needs electricity whilst the wind isn't blowing, they can draw it from people who have electric vehicles and have been willing to make those available to that grid network. So that's probably a good few years away yet, but when it comes, it will be an additional financial incentive for people who do have electric vehicles. So moving away from home, next is where you work, and we can also offer funding for support for chargers to go in there. So basically, that's probably the two places your car is going to spend the bulk of its time is at home and at work. And in both those places, if you can have a charge point there, then that means that you will rely even less again on public charging, and you can rest pretty easy about how easy it's going to be to keep your vehicle charged up. So the funding we provide for workplace charge points is for businesses that have either their own electric vehicles or to enable their staff who have electric vehicles to be able to operate them as effectively as possible. The advantages are obviously encourages people to make a sustainable shift to a greener mode of transport to work, and it also for organizations it demonstrates their green credentials, their commitment to the environment, which is beneficial for when they're sort of dealing with customers and clients. Again, same email address before. If this is something that's of interest to you, you can find it on our website, or you can use the Electric Vehicle Scotland email and get in touch and request an application form. We'll be happy to pass that on to your workplace if they're interested. And so the public charging network, which is so as I say, most of your charging will be done at home and at work. And if you want to go further afield into other places, there's also the public charging network, which Bob did a good job of giving background to before. The advantage, so it's obviously very convenient, as you can see the number of charge points there are there now. So £20 per year membership, and then the cost of the using of the charge points. Although, as Bob says, at the moment, most of those charge points are free to use. So it is even cheaper than electric vehicles already are compared to petrol and diesel, and that network is growing all the time. Bob spoke a little bit in his talk about the different charging speeds between the fast and the rapid chargers. So those fit sort of different requirements basically. So for the fast chargers, you can do something which is called destination charging, which is when you basically have your car parked at somewhere that you are spending a considerable amount of time. So examples there of Tesco's, where they've installed lots of these charge points so that shoppers can come, plug their car in, and while they're there doing their shopping, they can come back and find that their vehicle has gotten a reasonable top up in their time that they were in the shop. Other places that you might find this would be places like other shopping centres, leisure facilities, cafes, restaurants, places like that where people are like to stop and spend a few hours. And the advantage is they then can find that their car is ready to fully charged up again and ready to go, and they don't have to worry about looking for another service station as they would nowadays. So that's destination charging, and going on from that, you have So again, to just talk a little bit the electric A9, which is what has been a focus of the Scottish Government, turning Scotland's longest road into its first electric-enabled highway, and they're doing this by aiming to put in lots of electric charging hubs, and these will feature the rapid chargers, which Bob spoke about earlier, which can charge your vehicle much more quickly. So this is for people who aren't looking to stay somewhere for a particularly long time. They're just looking to get a quick top up on their vehicle before they head off on a longer journey, as is likely to be the case for a lot of people who are traveling on the A9. Again, these would be sort of essentially similar sites, shopping near shops, near cafes, places that people are going to spend a little bit of time, but not a huge amount of time, sort of half an hour, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, thereabouts. And then they can find that their vehicle has had a couple hundred miles of range added to it, and they can head on with relatively little inconvenience caused. So it's not just the electric A9, of course. It's all across Scotland. It's various trunk roads that will also be looking to get similar levels of infrastructure in place, because it needs to be, for electric vehicles to work, they need to work across the entire country, which is something that Transport Scotland obviously recognise with the support that they are giving to these projects. And with that, I'll pass back over to Gordon for the remainder.
All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We heard two great presentations there. If your interest in any of those topics has been piqued and you require further advice, then please feel free to call Home Energy Scotland. They offer free and impartial advice for all Scottish households and communities. They don't just deal with transport, there's renewable and water advice, that type of thing. Each advisor is trained and accredited, and it's also the referral point for EV loans and e-bikes. If you would like more information on the cost savings, then they can also give you a vehicle comparison report if you are looking to see the money that you can save between your current ICE vehicle and an electric vehicle. And we have the phone number there at the bottom as well if you want to get in touch. Just a little word on our upcoming event. So we appreciate that not everyone will have off-street parking, which is where electric charge points are predominantly installed for homeowners. So we are having an event, a Factor and Change event. It's being held at the Edinburgh Centre for Carbon Innovation. It's aimed at those who are looking for advice and information on technology, financial savings, the kind of assistance that can be put in place for people who don't have off-street parking but are looking at getting an EV and a charge point installed, and they perhaps can't realistically rely on the ChargePlace Scotland network as often as they would like. This is for new and existing developments, and up there we can see the date is the 17th of January at 9 AM. And there will also be a free lunch there, which should be enough to get you going. We also have the registration link there. We're now going to move on to our final poll. So we understand that we've asked quite a lot of you, but this is the final thing that we really require. So we heard a lot on the different topics up there: home charging, workplace, ChargePlace Scotland, charging technology, and charging hubs. So it would be really beneficial for us for us to gauge the level of interest and maybe decide on future webinars and what content would be, if you could decide which topics you would, or which of these topics you'd be most interested in hearing more about. So if you could please select one of them, that would be great. Yeah. So it looks like around about 3/4 of people have voted, which we appreciate. Just going to let it go a couple more seconds, and then we can look at the results. So it looks like charging technology and charging hubs are pretty much neck and neck. So that's potentially where we could do our next webinar, focus our content there. From your feedback, we'll certainly be avoiding workplace charging in ChargePlace Scotland. Looks like there's very little interest there, and I would say that's down to the content that was put forth by our two presenters here. You don't need any more knowledge on that one. Now we can move on to our Q&A. So just a couple of questions that we've had. So maybe you can help with this one, Ian. What do I do if I go to a charge point and it's broken?
Yeah. So if any of the charge points on the ChargePlace Scotland network will have a sticker on them that gives you a link, sort of number to their helpline. So that's 24/7. So you call that up, and they should be able to. Hopefully, they'll be able to carry out remote fix on that and get you sorted out. Sometimes it may be the case that they are not able to do that, and actually requires the problem to be passed on to the manufacturer, in which case it would require a bit more time, and it may not be possible to get it resolved whilst you are sitting there getting your vehicle charged. In which case it would depend on you hopefully having enough charge that you can get to the next nearest station, which if you have the ChargePlace Scotland, you can look it up on your phone, and find the location of that, and hopefully get to another one that is operational.
Oh, okay, that's great. And just maybe following up from that, what does someone do if they go to an electric vehicle bay and there is an internal combustion engine vehicle parked there?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is a bit of a challenge for the industry. I mean, the funding that's provided for charge point installations does allow for the painting of bay markings, which make very clear that the charge points are for the exclusive use of electric vehicles. This does seem to be quite effective. We've certainly had it reported from charge point hosts who haven't had the bay markings and then have had them put in, that it does seem to have a deterrent effect. People realize that their vehicles aren't supposed to be parked there. It hasn't removed the problem altogether. So it depends on where the site. So some hosts, if it's a private host, they may have some kind of traffic regulation system in place, or parking regulation, which enables them to ticket people who are there, who parks in these areas who shouldn't be. So that's one solution that's what's possible, but not all places unfortunately have that. And other places, for more public locations, it does require sort of slight change in legislation to enable that, which is something that's likely to be seen soon, which will mean that parking wardens will have the ability to ticket people for this. I'm not able to say how soon that will be, but I think once that's in place, and again, another part of it is just about sort of a lack of awareness. People aren't realizing that what they're doing is not appropriate, but once they've got a sticker on their car, or certainly once they've gotten a fine or two, that's likely to really cut down on that kind of abuse, hopefully.
All right, and here's a question for you, Bob. Are streetlight chargers still similar to Ubitricity, where a prohibitively expensive ESVE unit has to be purchased to use?
No. Is a simple answer. The street chargers that we have developed don't need an extra EVSE. It just relies on your own vehicle's charging cable, and you plug it in just like you would do with a normal Type 1 or Type 2 post that you would find anywhere else. You're maybe going to see a few streetlight chargers popping up here and there. It's one of these things that it depends on whether the streetlight's close to the curb, or it depends on earthing as well, and supply to streetlights as well, because traditionally streetlights don't have an awful lot of power going to them. So there's a few technical things to overcome with those ones, but it is something that's going to make up a part of the charging network as time goes on, and you maybe see a few of them appearing.
Yeah, and just following on from that, who would own those?
Probably going to be mostly local authorities that put those ones in. You might find some of them in workplace car parks, but it's going to have to be a workplace car park with a lot of streetlights. And a lot of workplace car parks now have LED streetlights, and they're quite well scattered around the car parks. So those car parks might benefit from having freestanding posts instead of something that's attached to a streetlight. So, but yes, it's something it's another thing that's going towards building that network up and making sure that people have somewhere to plug in the car. Because running a charge cable and an extension lead from the third floor of a tenement isn't going to work. So you need that kind of alternate option there.
Okay, so there would potentially be a payment system in place as well. So it would be a...
Oh yeah, they would be connected to whatever network. So like ChargePlace Scotland, you present your RFID card to start a charge session on them. They would be linked in with that as well. So they wouldn't just be dumb posts to plug into.
All right, Ian, one for you regarding ChargePlace Scotland. So are you envisaging that there could potentially be a sort of like booking system style app for people to request charging slots?
That's a good question. I think it's certainly something that has been discussed. I think it's still at the stage where the logistics of how that would actually work are quite challenging. Questions around, if someone books a slot and then they're late or they don't show up, does that mean that the charge point then is unavailable, or how that would work exactly? But it's certainly something that I think is being looked into as the demand does increase on the various charge points. So they're looking for some kind of solution to it. I'm not aware of any imminent plans to introduce this or timescales for that, but I think it is something that is being discussed. And certainly once we're aware of likelihood of that coming online, then we'll update people and make them just pass that information on.
Okay, perfect. And Bob, back to you. So you covered technology and 7 and 22 kilowatts. So the question is, when do you expect to see the first 150 kilowatt public charge points in Scotland?
The first ones will probably be early next year. Our product, the eVolt product, is going to be released in the first quarter of 2019. But having looked at the various bits and pieces for planning, I believe that Ionity have a planning application in for Gretna services at the petrol station there, and there's going to be some high-powered chargers going into that location. So yeah, early next year you'll probably see those on the network, but unless you've got something like a new Audi e-tron or I was trying to think what else charges at that kind of high rate, you're not going to be able to really take advantage of them at that kind of power. But yeah, come in first quarter next year, keep an eye out for them popping up here and there.
Perfect. And I remember the North Coast 500 being mentioned. So someone's planning to do that route in a Nissan Leaf, the new 40 kilowatt version. So would they be able to reach all charge points when the expected safe range of 100 miles in winter with the battery depletion due to the seasonal effects on the battery?
I would say so, yeah. Like everything else, we'll plan the trip as you go. Watch out for the weather and so on and so forth. You're going to get an awful lot of regen coming down hills. If you coast and put the car in neutral, that will help conserve some of the range. Jonathan Porterfield's got some good hints and tips for getting the most out of the range of Leafs. So if you look for Eco Cars on Twitter, he's got some various videos and so on and so forth. There are plenty of destination chargers around that route as well, plenty of hotels. So if you want to stop over, by all means take advantage of a destination charger to get your battery up to full. And just take your time and enjoy the scenery.
All right, great. And I believe this next one is also for you from a previous participant in an EST webinar. So plug-in hybrids using rapid chargers. Is there any way to configure an eVolt rapid charger so that it can detect if a vehicle is drawing single or three-phase AC power and refuse to charge the former since it can't rapid charge?
That I don't know.
Thank me for asking that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it's a massive frustration sometimes, but I think the key to that one is education. What what we as a ChargePoint supplier and a ChargePoint installer and ChargePoint manufacturer don't want to do is kind of shut anybody out. You know, if you've got somebody who doesn't know what they're doing and they rock up to a ChargePoint and using that AC power on a slow charge is the only way they can get to where they need to go or something like that. If we lock them out of the post and they're not able to do that, then the driver's stuck, and you know we kind of don't want to go there. It is a frustrating thing though, and you know that RAC Foundation report did really kind of go into it in a bit of depth. But I think a lot of it comes down to education, and that's where you know organisations like Electric Vehicle Association Scotland will help to kind of get that education out there, speak to people. If we get that into the dealerships as well, so the dealers are more aware of what they're selling and how that vehicle could be used. You know, it's all going to help the kind of process as we go down the line. But yeah, it's not something I would be keen to do because it could unfairly you know, impact people.
Okay, and just regarding the follow-up to that question, so is there a way to configure a rapid charger to terminate a charging session if the vehicle's charging power drops below a set amount or doesn't exceed this amount within the first 10 seconds of charging?
Again, there probably is a way around that. There are various technical methods and settings you can play with to do it, but again, that would be potentially causing more issues down the line. I remember in the early days, chargers were set to go to 30 minutes and then stop, and that was it, regardless of what charge you got out of them. But people would often just plug them back in again and keep on going. So it's the kind of thing that there's no one-shot solution to it. Try and share that without sounding like Connery. But yeah, there's no kind of one magic button you can press to stop things like ChargePoint hogging. It's going to be a kind of combination of things, but like I say, mostly education to teach people how to properly use the ChargePoints, have the proper etiquette for them.
Okay, back to you, Ian. Or in fact, no, Bob. Here's one for you. We'll stick on you.
What was off the hook?
So,
right,
how is it that? Well, just regarding eVolt's maintenance systems, how quickly is it that you're responding to your?
We aim to respond to a maintenance issue that can't be resolved remotely within at least 48 hours, if not quicker than that, because we monitor social media, we monitor Facebook and Twitter and things. We get trouble tickets in from ChargePlace Scotland, but if we hear about something before ChargePlace Scotland tell us, we'll try and divert our engineer to get that issue fixed. Whatever it might be, you know, there's been some issues where we've tried to get some stuff done as quick as we can. Riverside Museum in Glasgow is a good example where it was vandalised, and we went in quickly to replace the cables to get things all sorted out for it. So, you know, at the end of the day, we don't want to see anybody stuck. We want the network to be the best it possibly can be, and we'll do whatever we can to address any issues that crop up as quickly as we can.
All right, that's great. And okay, back to yourself, Ian. So the question is, any plans to ensure sufficient or appropriate infrastructure for taxis and private hire vehicles to ensure they do not overload the public network?
Yeah, that's just a very legitimate point. Obviously, taxis, private hire vehicles, due to the much higher amount of mileage that they'll do in a day relative to most other vehicles, will rely on public chargers quite a bit more, and therefore there is a concern that they might occupy them a bit more, and that could create some conflict. Recognizing this and being keen to make sure that electric taxis, electric private hire vehicles are able to work effectively for their drivers, and also it's a good sort of way of showcasing electric vehicles to people who otherwise might not get into them. We can provide support for taxi operators who are looking to take on electric vehicles, as long as they have somewhere to host those points. So those will be just for their own use. Similar to the other business workplace support that we provide, it's just, you know, they demonstrate that they have that requirement, and we're keen to support it. So that hopefully takes some of the strain off the public network, the fact that they do have that resource back at their depots or wherever they may be based.
All right, so I think with that we will just wrap up. We have a lot of questions. We did receive a lot of questions. I feel like we answered plenty, but there's still a lot of unanswered ones there. So for those of you who have a question that has been unanswered, we will write to you, respond to your email addresses, and as well we can distribute the webinar to everyone as well. So for your further viewing pleasure. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to our two panelists, Ian McLeod and Bob Murphy, and also thanks to Heather Quinn, who's been quiet as a mouse in the background, making sure that everything goes well. All right, thanks everyone. Bye bye.